What is going on, everyone? How are you doing? I hope you're doing good, because it is good to feel good. And yeah, there's an election happening tomorrow. How did that come about? Well, to be technical about it, it came about because Rishi Sunak forgot to bring his brolly and decided, oh yeah, we're just going to call an election. And now it's happening. You know, first time in 5 years we've had a general election, which feels quite nice, and you know, nice that it's been spaced out for a change. But here we go. General election, and I want to do some little discussions. I was going to do some videos in the lead up to the election, but if I'm being quite honest, I've been very busy and also just needed some downtime. But I wanted to do this video today just to kind of talk about my thoughts and feelings ahead of the election, as well as maybe kind of hint at who I am going to be voting for. And I think on that latter, it's probably a bit obvious who I'm going to say who I'm going to be voting for, but I'll come on to that shortly. But first of all, I just wanted to openly address not just Rishi Sunak, but the Conservative Party as a whole. So, you've been in government for 14 years now, and can anyone who is in the Conservative Party who's standing as a candidate really say that compared to when they entered office 14 years ago, that things are better? Like, seriously, it's kind of a hypothetical question. Is anything better than it was 14 years ago? Are NHS waiting lists better than they were 14 years ago? Are the people who rely on food banks better than they were 14 years ago? Are there people who are vulnerable back then still less vulnerable now, than when they were 14 years ago? There's so much I could go on about, but it's just, the Tories are just, wasted everything. They've had so much wasted potential, and the fact that, they're literally like resorting to anything in terms of desperation to try and get re-elected is just ridiculous. And there's just there's so many choice words I could use to describe about the Conservative Party. There's sleaze, corruption, incompetence. I could give all day about this, but just I find it fascinating that that the Conservative Party have lasted in government for as long as they have. But here we are, we have a brilliant chance to kind of oust them from government once and for all, and hopefully for a long time, touch wood. But I guess there's some things I just want to talk about, i.e. that the Tories have done in the last 14 years that I thought, really does irk me. And I'm going to be completely honest, I don't think what I say in this video is going to be able to do it justice. There's a really good video floating about from Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. I'll link it in the description. It's very worth the watch. You probably might not be able to watch it in the UK, but if you've got a VPN or something, you should be able to watch it. Definitely worth the half hour for it. But where do we begin with the Tories? Because, they promised us everything was going to be much better than after 13 years of Labour back, when they came to office in 2010 under the coalition with the Lib Dems. And then, since then, everything just kind of went to shit, really, if we're being quite honest. There was the austerity years where they basically said, oh, the economy's in a worse position, oh, we've got to kind of claw back, and, public services are going to, suffer as a result, and, people did suffer as a result. Even people died as a result of austerity measures, and yet the people who are responsible for the austerity years, i.e. David Cameron, George Osborne and co, they allowed that to happen. They've not faced any, jail time for it, no prosecution, and it's just ridiculous, it is. Then, of course, just jumping ahead a bit, we then had, of course, Brexit. I'm still kind of like reeling from what happened 8 years ago in that referendum. I know I didn't vote in it, but I just, look back on it and think of, what could have been. I mean, if we were being completely honest here, the reason why David Cameron called it is because he wanted to appease the Eurosceptics in his party and also prevent the far right in this country, i.e. UKIP and what would come later. So even Cameron campaigned to remain, and quite a few people in his government campaigned to remain, but of course there's a lot of Eurosceptics out there. There is one guy in particular who of course made, a complete lie and, promoted it to the country on the side of a bus. We'll come on to him just momentarily. And then of course the referendum happened. Even David Cameron himself didn't expect us to leave the EU. And what is the first thing he does? He decides to bugger off and say it's not his problem. So then, of course, as a result of Cameron leaving, we have Theresa May in power. there's everything that happened, under her watch, the Brexit deadlock. Then ultimately that would, lead to Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister. He tried to prorogue Parliament to try and get a no-deal Brexit through, which obviously was deemed unlawful. Then we had another general election off the back of that, and obviously the Conservatives won with a massive landslide, and, made it necessary that there was that mandate in the House of Commons for us to leave the EU. Again, I disagree with the idea that we should have left the EU in the first place, but it is what the people voted for. I acknowledge it had to be delivered on, and, I'm not saying, yeah, let's go ahead and rejoin tomorrow. I mean, here's me thinking, I think probably down the line it might be something that would be considered by another party. I mean, I know other parties have, campaigned for maybe elements of rejoining the EU and maybe like whatnot, but I think it's going to be a while before that does happen. And then, of course, what happens after Brexit? Well, of course, we had COVID. That was a fun time, wasn't it? And obviously, that's sarcasm. I just really feel for the people who went through a lot during COVID. Those who suffered. Those who lost loved ones, and just those who wish they could be with their loved ones in particular who couldn't. And it just really irks me what happened during the pandemic, especially, little things like, the mishandling of the pandemic completely by the Conservatives, Boris Johnson kind of like just, making it up as he goes along, missed Cobra meetings at the beginning of the pandemic, catches COVID, and then, then decides, fuck it, let's go and party and whatnot, and, thinking no one would notice until it did eventually all come to light. But it kind of hits home for me in a sense. I didn't lose loved ones, fortunately enough, during COVID, but one person I did lose, a little after the pandemic and lockdown restrictions had eased, was my nana. And one thing I always think about is literally just before the start of the first lockdown back in March of 2020, she was going to come down and see me and my family at the time, but owing to the lockdown restrictions that were coming into place, that was going to be putting the kibosh on that. During the pandemic, especially in that first year, she had a second cancer diagnosis, which really, worried me, especially, we weren't allowed to see her or anything like that. No one could go out and see. My mum was kind of like her carer, if that was to make sense, because she's my mum's mum, essentially. And, thankfully she was, deemed cancer-free, around January of 2021, but then sadly she got her third cancer diagnosis in February of 21, around just after the third lockdown, and that was where it was terminal. I think what hurts for me is just knowing that I wish I just had some more time in her final years before she did pass away. It really hit me close to home just seeing her, for the first time in over a year. It would have been, May of 2021. I was just beside myself because, I could see her deteriorating, and I could see how much she had gone through, and, and especially in the months prior to her passing, like, just how much she suffered. Again, there was no COVID element towards that, and when she did pass away eventually, that was well after lockdown restrictions had eased. But it does suck that, in a similar vein, I wish I could have seen more of her before she passed away. And people who didn't have that same luxury either, some people having to see their loved ones from either behind closed doors or in front of like a phone screen or something, and it just really does. It's horrible, those at the heart of government basically got away with what they did during the pandemic. And I think there's things that happened during the pandemic I haven't even gotten to, i.e., inadequate PPE being provided for those in the NHS and in social care, taxpayers' money being exploited for personal gain from the Conservative Party. There's just so much that happened during that time that really pissed me off. And, I've always had my reservations about the Conservative Party, and especially when they've been in government, but, it was around that time where I thought to myself, who the hell in their right mind would probably think to vote the Conservatives at the next general election, or this general election that's coming up tomorrow? Just think about that. For anyone who did lose loved ones during the pandemic, and and knowing the fact of what went on at the heart of government, just think about that. Say any more on that, because I'm just going to get emotional again and think about those again. But it was a tough time, it was. And then there's after everything started coming to light as to what happened during the pandemic, then of course Boris Johnson on the offensive is insisting that nothing happened, and then of course just more and more evidence started to come out to say that, oh yeah, this did indeed happen. He, is given the chance to resign multiple times, and then he's like, no, I'm not going. I've got things to get on with, what the people want me to get on with. Then, of course, he had a vote of confidence, which he survived. Then, of course, the Chris Pincher shenanigans happened, which ultimately led to him resigning and obviously seeing mass resignations from within government. Then, of course, off the back of Boris Johnson resigning, we did indeed get a new Prime Minister. That was, of course, the blink and you miss it moment of Liz Truss. And where do we begin with her? She was outlasted by a lettuce, which is bloody hilarious. And, she might not think the same way, but it is hilarious. Liz Truss, promised, this great thing that was going to happen, but it didn't, and ultimately she tried to deliver a mini budget with her Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng that ultimately fell flat on its arse, blew a big hole in the economy, and people are still kind of suffering as a result of that mini budget. And especially, I work for a bank, I work in the mortgage customer service team, and I feel sorry for those who have been impacted by higher mortgage payments because of what happened. And obviously increase in interest rates as well have contributed towards that too. But yeah, and then Liz Truss decided to bugger off because she was just getting herself in more and more trouble, and she couldn't last. Then who does swoop in as Prime Minister but Rishi Sunak, who one, didn't get elected by members of the Conservative Party, and two, didn't even get elected by members in the House of Commons or anything like that. Nobody voted for him to be Prime Minister, for goodness sake. So here we are. Rishi Sunak, he's presided over a lot of shambles and shenanigans. Professionalism, integrity and accountability at the heart of government. A lot of those things have been quite lacking, if we're being quite honest. And just off the back of Sunak being in power, just so much shady shit has happened under him. There was obviously everything to do with Gavin Williamson being a bully. There was Dominic Raab being a bully. There was Nadeem Zahawi, who got in trouble for not declaring his, unpaid tax, and despite being the Conservative Party chairman. What else has happened? There was obviously the whole tale of Suella Braverman, and the fact that she became Home Secretary after being sacked just a week before. And then eventually, her being sacked in disgrace again. David Cameron being brought back into the mix as Foreign Secretary and appointed to the House of Lords. I'm trying to think what else has happened. There's so much. There's obviously, RAC in schools, and the Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, doing, thinking that, she's done, in her words, a fucking great job. And just so much shenanigans. There's probably stuff that I'm mentioning, but again, I'm not going to be able to do it all justice. But here we are, general election in just a few days' time, and we're going to say who we want to be in government. And the fact that, even in the lead up to this campaign, we've had all sorts, i.e., candidates betting on the date of the election, and, the fact that this went completely unnoticed by people in the Conservative Party just speaks for itself. All the sleaze, and there's so much scandal that's happened over this time that, and I just feel like there are people who haven't got justice for their wrongdoings. The post office scandal, those who died as a result of the Grenfell fire, those who've been affected by the Windrush scandal and not getting compensation. There's just so much the Conservatives have just turned a blind eye to in 14 years. And again, going back to my question at the beginning, which Conservative candidate can say in their right mind anything is better than it was 14 years ago when they came to office? Ask yourself that tomorrow. But yeah, anyway, after that whole little tangent and me getting slightly emotional, that kind of happens when I think about my loved ones. But on a more positive note, I'm going to talk about who I want to vote for and what my intention is for voting. And I'll be honest, I make it no secret who I've supported in the past and who I support at the moment. But it's no surprise that I will be voting Labour on Thursday. I guess kind of a reason as to why I've always supported Labour is it kind of goes back to my childhood. Now, of course, when I was a child, I obviously can't vote. I was 6 months old when Labour under Tony Blair won in 1997. So it was actually, you know, the reforms in education that I was able to get, you know, support that I needed for my early development when I was younger, especially with me having an Asperger's diagnosis. So the support that I got in primary school and secondary school helped me get, like, you know, the support that I needed, you know, things like, you know, teaching assistants who were able to help me out, you know, extra support where it was needed. It was just, you know, that was because of the reforms under the last Labour government, which, you know, to this day I'm very fortunate for. And I often attribute, you know, the support that I got during that time, you know, helped form the stepping stones to the person that I am at the moment. I know I often attribute my time in the Q8, you know, helping me come out of my cage, and now I'm doing just fine. Which, now that I mentioned that, saw the Killers a few weeks ago, so I thought I got to throw that in there. But, you know, for all my adult life, I've also voted Labour, you know, because I guess my political beliefs and, you know, things that I stand for really correlate with what they stand for. So every election that I've been eligible to vote in, general election wise, I've always voted for Labour. Coming back from the last 5 years, you know, the point of, like, you know, absolute defeat, you know, under Jeremy Corbyn, that was a bitter pill to swallow on election night. It was horrible. And I felt really depressed afterwards. But then, of course, in the 5 years since that election, Keir Starmer's come in and, you know, he's really turned the party around, making it, like, you know, a credible force that could be in government in a few days' time. And, you know, I acknowledge Keir Starmer is not a perfect person. You know, there are, you know, things I might disagree with him on. But overall, I think he's, you know, a very credible, you know, leader of the party. You know, he's got background in public service, you know, working for the Crown Prosecution Service, and I think he'll be, you know, a really decent Prime Minister, and, you know, someone who actually gets things done and, you know, doesn't put, you know, priority of the party first over the people of this country. He's doing the vice versa of that, and I commend him for doing that. And I think, you know, however long Labour are in government, I think Keir Starmer is going to be an incredible Prime Minister, so bring it on. Also, it's worth mentioning as well, in the lead up to this election, I have been out on the doorstep with the local Labour team in Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland. Our candidate is Luke Meyer. He's absolutely incredible, and, you know, it's been really nice to get to know him and the team, as well as, you know, just going out on the doorstep and engaging with people. I acknowledge there are people who won't vote Labour. That's just democracy at the end of the day. But just the sentiment of people saying that, you know, they want to see that change, and, you know, hoping that Labour deliver it, and, you know, nice that people share that same sentiment as well. I tell you what's ironic is that if Luke beats Simon Clarke, and going back to Simon Clarke, we've got that little bit of history with Fingergate last year. What's ironic is if Luke beats Simon on Thursday and becomes my MP for Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland, then it's going to be the first time that I've lived in a constituency with a Labour MP, because, for context, I am 27 years old. Every constituency I've lived in, like throughout every general election, has always had a Conservative MP. In fact, I was 6 months old when Labour got into government back in 1997, and in fact, in my old constituency, which was South West Bedfordshire, they were so close that year to having a Labour MP, but just, you know, short by a few hundred votes. So that could be interesting. Also interested to see if that constituency does flip in this election. That would be nice. It's been wonderful being out on the campaign team, and also quite a humble brag as well. As part of her lovely battle bus that's been going from, like, you know, place to place, I got to meet Angela Rayner the other day. In fact, there's a nice picture of me, her and Luke. And I tell you what was quite heartwarming to actually speak to her just for a little brief bit and tell her how, you know, in a similar vein to her, how she got support through Sure Start and as a care worker under the last Labour government. similar in a vein that, you know, we've both got our respective support under the years of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, and look where we are now, you know, championing for the next generation. And she said, in like really heartwarmingly to me, that, you know, I'm proud to see you here, and, you know, you've come full circle to, you know, deliver that message for the next generation as well. That was lovely, that was. And I'm sure on Friday, if all does happen, let's not be complacent, but if all does happen as we think it will on Friday, then Angela Rayner could be our Deputy Prime Minister. And that's just, I find that really empowering, from a single mother. You know, she was a single mother who left school at the age of 16 to the point where, you know, she's a working class role model for all women, and being Deputy Prime Minister is going to be an absolutely incredible thing for her. I'm buzzing for it, and I'm very buzzing for the election itself. So I can't believe it is tomorrow, although it could be the day of uploading this, could be today. So it could be today that the election's happening. But anyway, I'm going to go into the polling booth tomorrow with that, obviously, that sense of optimism and knowing that change is coming. And I just cannot wait. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be doing a little vlog on election night. I never really do it, but it's one of those things where I'm like, I think we're going to have one of these big once-in-a-generation election results that I think it's just going to be worth witnessing. And, you know, the end of the Tories as we know it, I cannot wait. I'm really excited for everything that goes on. But anyway, kind of to end off this video, I do want to say, if you are going out to vote tomorrow or today when this is being uploaded, I don't know when it is being uploaded, by the way, but when you are going out on the 4th of July to, you know, cast your vote, make sure you've got voter's ID to hand. It's the first time in a general election that this is happening, so if you've not got your ID, just check in the link in the description just to confirm what ID is applicable to use. And yeah, go for it. Also, you may live in a constituency where you probably support a certain party, but, you know, there's another party that have a chance to get in over the Conservative Party. Then what I would advise you do is do your research and go for a tactical vote. Again, you might not necessarily agree with the party that you're voting for, but if you tactically vote them, then, you know, you could see, you know, someone beating the Tories on election night, and we have a lovely, great moment where that happens. So I think it's going to be an incredible election night. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens and see who could potentially lose their seats. I've got my bingo card ready, I've got my Prosecco ready. I'm just very excited, and I will leave you and love you here, but leave you, of course, with some advice as well. That is always to enjoy yourself, stay safe, and make the most of every opportunity that comes your way. Thank you for watching, and peace.